The Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains one of the most enduring and emotionally charged conflicts in the world. The decades-long struggle has witnessed violence, displacement, and suffering on both sides. Amidst this volatile backdrop, a particularly controversial comparison has emerged, one that draws parallels between Israel's actions in the Palestinian territories and the horrors of Nazi Germany. This analogy, while vehemently rejected by many, finds resonance among others, who point to what they perceive as similar patterns of oppression, dispossession, and violence. This essay will delve into the heart of this debate, examining the arguments made by those who draw comparisons between Israel and Nazi Germany. We will explore the historical context, analyze the validity of these comparisons, and ultimately consider their implications for understanding the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is crucial to approach this sensitive topic with nuance and respect, recognizing the dangers of both historical revisionism and the trivialization of the Holocaust. The comparison often arises from a sense of outrage and injustice felt by Palestinians and their supporters. They point to the displacement of Palestinians from their homes during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe, as a foundational act of dispossession akin to the Nazi expulsion of Jews from their homes. Critics of Israeli policies often draw parallels between the experiences of Palestinians and those of Jews under Nazi rule. They cite the systematic discrimination, segregation, and violence faced by Palestinians living under Israeli occupation as evidence of an apartheid-like system. The Israeli government's control over Palestinian movement, access to resources, and civil liberties is seen as reminiscent of the Nazi regime's oppressive policies against Jews. The ongoing expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank is another point of contention. Critics argue that the confiscation of Palestinian land for settlements, often justified on religious or historical grounds, mirrors Nazi Germany's expansionist policies and its pursuit of Lebensraum, or living space at the expense of neighboring populations. The settlements, viewed as illegal under international law, are seen as a deliberate attempt to fragment Palestinian territory and undermine the viability of a future Palestinian state. The Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip, in place since 2007, is also frequently cited as an example of collective punishment reminiscent of Nazi tactics. The blockade, imposed after Hamas took control of Gaza, has severely restricted the movement of people and goods, leading to dire humanitarian consequences for the Palestinian population. Critics argue that the blockade is a form of collective punishment that punishes innocent civilians for the actions of their leaders, a policy condemned by international law. The comparison between Israeli settlements and Nazi Germany's Lebensraum policy is particularly controversial and requires careful examination. Lebensraum, a central tenet of Nazi ideology, called for the expansion of German territory in Eastern Europe to provide living space for the German people. This expansionist policy, rooted in racial superiority and a desire for agricultural self-sufficiency, resulted in the brutal conquest and colonization of vast territories, accompanied by mass murder, ethnic cleansing, and enslavement. While there are undeniable differences in scale and context, some argue that the Israeli settlement enterprise shares disturbing similarities with Lebensraum. The ongoing confiscation of Palestinian land for settlements, often justified on biblical or historical grounds, is seen as a form of territorial expansion driven by a sense of entitlement and a disregard for the rights of the indigenous population. Moreover, the settlements are viewed as a deliberate attempt to create facts on the ground that would make a future Palestinian state unviable. The comparison between settlements and Lebensraum, however, is not without its critics. Opponents argue that it is historically inaccurate and morally reprehensible to equate the actions of Israel, a democratic state established in the aftermath of the Holocaust, with those of Nazi Germany, a genocidal regime responsible for the systematic murder of 6 million Jews. They argue that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, while tragic and complex, does not involve the same level of state-sponsored violence and industrialized killing that characterized the Nazi era. Section 4. The limits of comparison scale, context, and intent. While acknowledging the suffering endured by Palestinians, it is crucial to recognize the significant differences in scale, context, and intent between the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the horrors of Nazi Germany. The Holocaust was a unique and unprecedented event in human history, characterized by the systematic and industrialized extermination of Jews and other minority groups on an unimaginable scale. To equate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with this genocide is to diminish the singularity and enormity of the Holocaust. Furthermore, the historical and political context of the two conflicts are vastly different. Nazi Germany's actions were driven by a racist ideology that sought the elimination of entire populations deemed undesirable. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, while rooted in competing claims to land and national identity, does not involve the same level of racial hatred or genocidal intent. Finally, it is essential to consider the intent of the actors involved. While the Israeli government's policies towards Palestinians have been widely criticized, there is no evidence to suggest that Israel harbors a desire to exterminate the Palestinian people. To suggest otherwise is to engage in dangerous hyperbole that does a disservice to the victims of both the Holocaust and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Section 5, Holocaust Distortion and the Dangers of False Equivalence. The comparison between Israel and Nazi Germany has been widely condemned as historically inaccurate, morally reprehensible, and deeply offensive to both Jews and Holocaust survivors. Critics argue that such comparisons trivialize the Holocaust by equating the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews with the complexities of a territorial and political conflict. This trivialization, they argue, risks diminishing the memory of the Holocaust and undermining efforts to combat anti-Semitism. Moreover, drawing false equivalences between Israel and Nazi Germany can fuel anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy theories. By portraying Israel as a Nazi-like entity, such comparisons play into long-standing anti-Semitic stereotypes that depict Jews as powerful, manipulative, and inherently evil. This can have dangerous real-world consequences, as evidenced by the recent surge in anti-Semitic incidents worldwide. Instead of resorting to hyperbolic comparisons, it is crucial to engage with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on its own terms, recognizing the historical complexities, grievances, and aspirations of both sides. This requires a nuanced understanding of the conflict's origins, the role of international law, and the imperative for a just and lasting peace based on a two-state solution. Section 6. Towards a nuanced understanding and a peaceful future. The comparison of Israeli policies to those of Nazi Germany, while deeply controversial and often misinformed, should not be dismissed out of hand. It is essential to engage with the underlying concerns that fuel such comparisons, particularly the plight of Palestinians living under occupation and the perception of injustice. However, it is equally crucial to recognize the dangers of historical distortion, the trivialization of the Holocaust, and the potential for fueling anti-Semitism. Moving forward, it is imperative to foster a more nuanced and informed understanding of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This requires acknowledging the historical complexities, the legitimate grievances of both sides, and the imperative for a just and lasting peace based on international law and a two-state solution. By rejecting simplistic comparisons and engaging in constructive dialogue, we can work towards a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace, security, and dignity.